The human edge, will it be the one thing AI fails to copy? And that's really the focus of today's discussion. There's a lot of noise around AI right now, and we have three great people here who, along with, I still call him Naru Sarath, will possibly delve deeper into this. So without spending more time, we have three speakers, three angles, and one elephant in the room, which is AI. And our belief is this is a conversation. It's not really presentations of sorts on stage, and each of them anchors a different dimension that you'll hear. So let me start with welcoming TK Kurien. Hi TK, welcome. I'll get you on. So TK is from the HPS Bangalore 76 batch and is currently CEO and managing partner at Premji Invest. Prior to that, he was CEO and vice chairman of Wipro, as many of you would know. Chartered accountant with many tech patents to his credit. TK has led technology companies through paradigm shifts. We hope to hear how he sees AI reshaping value, industries, and roles. We're presuming he'll possibly address things around, which skills can get commoditized through AI coming in, or the enforcement of AI in some way, and which could become more valuable in some way. And how do you see the transition happening? I'm sure Naru spent more time on this. I think he possibly will also, that one question that many of us may have in our minds, saying, what should I tell my child to do? Right, so that could be something that he may touch upon. Last but not the least, before he gets on stage, is he's also an avid runner. So any runners here? Oh, there you are. Okay, so there's a running group we may want to set up. Yeah. Welcome, TK. Yeah. The next is Mohan. Mohan's been the guy we bouncing things off between Sarath and me more often than not, trying to get this whole thing together. Mohan's HPS Bangalore 1989, IIT Madras, IIM Calcutta. Currently VP Customer Experience at Orange Health, and has previously held senior management roles at both Amazon and Practo Health. And he says he's not a technologist by training, but runs operation at a health tech startup, which is Orange, I presume, right? And lives inside the change that's happening on a daily basis. His perspective, I think, would be more ground level up, which is really what it's like to actually adapt an organization or a function that you're in, and what actions he's taking. He's possibly the person in this room who's closest to a lot of us in terms of an audience, in terms of what he's facing. Welcome on, please. Sorry, Anil, I thought I'll be a little generous with my alum colleagues. Yeah, the third panelist is somebody I think we're all waiting to hear. Anil Ananthaswamy. Anil is from IIT Madras, MS from the University of Washington. Currently a professor of practice at IIT Madras. Anil's outstanding. In terms of, if I tell you more about him, he was the former deputy news editor at The New Scientist and an award-winning science journalist and author. His recent book, Why Machines Learn, explores what AI can actually do. Incidentally, as an aside, that's available here, and Anil, if you don't mind signing some of those books for some of our folks here. Anil understands how AI is built. He possibly has a sharper lens than a lot of us on what AI can do and where it's heading. And our assumption is that he can really split or share or split the capability between, let's say, hype and the near-term trajectory to a large extent. So please welcome Anil Ananthaswamy. And to put this whole session together is our very own Sarath Naru. Naru, as some of you may know, is one of the pioneers in the VC space. He still heads his own firm called Venture East. And as he says, he's a VC who invests in AI, but bets on the human edge for the final decision. Welcome, Naru. Over to you.
I'm going to stand for a little while because they are the stars, and I'm going to stay on the side. I'm truly humbled, to be very candid, TK, Anil,
Hello.
and Mohan. You heard only a small microcosm of what their backgrounds are. What Uday just said. He didn't want to tell you too much about it. He didn't want to actually scare me, I think, which is the reason why I'm standing up. I'm going to just add one statement. What TK's portfolio in Premji Invest is supposedly the most valuable AI portfolio in India, maybe rest of the world as well. But that's what I've read in the news media. And Anil, truly amazing. His book is not only on AI. He's written a few other books. One of them is on neuroscience behind schizophrenia, out-of-body experiences, and what have you, if I remember correctly. And there's a third book, which is even more interesting. It's about what is it that motivates people to study quantum science? It's the philosophy behind it, and it's not about the science behind it. And that's another book. I mean, just to give you a tidbits about the kind of people we have on the panel. And Mohan, I also call him Yoko, by the way. Yoko is the most successful sumo wrestler ever, correct? And not only that, he rides a powerful 650cc Versus, and we go on a motorcycle group together. He's very versatile, and he took me on a ride. The first time we went on a ride, my bike didn't start, so I went on his pillion, and it was a really exciting ride. So you have really interesting people here. Having said that, usually on these panels, I call myself a rabble rouser, but I think today I'm going to be a silent spectator. I'm going to let the wise men speak. I'm going to call them the wise men. Okay, wise boy and wise men. And basically, I'm going to this whole topic, while Uday did outline what the human edge. While that is the case, I just want to bring out, what our thought process was on how we want to structure this. This is a series of talks, and this is the first one of them. And this is going to be a fairly broad talk today. And what I expect, and I hope, and it's up to the speakers to take us where they want to take us, start from a broad view of AI and how it's shaping up, etc., to a more specific view on businesses, individuals for themselves, and so on. And then finally going into schools and colleges and education. How do schools and colleges, these are the 3 points we want to cover today. That's what we agreed on, but we can go off script. We don't have to be on the same script. That's how we're going to run it. And at the end of this session, after these 3 questions are addressed, we will have a Q&A session. We won't have any questions in between other than from me. So that's how we plan to do this. One other point I want to make is, I was reading the Hindu the other day, not long ago, and I have to read this verbatim thing that I read there. Pretty interesting. Give me 1 second. So this about, I don't know why this was newsworthy and why Hindu published it. It says, a machine learning algorithm walks into a bar. The bartender asks, what will you have? The algorithm says, what's everyone else having? I'll pause there. And I think Anil gets it in terms of, you don't need to be scared about AI. What we need to do is embrace it and, of course, see how we can do better. Now, the first question I have, the first request I have for the 3 gentlemen here is to give a preamble, a 5-minute speech on what would be, say, on the 3 points we had there, which is one was about whatever you want to say about AI transformation of our world, and that will help us understand AI and not be blindsided by it. We also want to add value to humanity as a human being, not just only in the ways that AI cannot. And finally, how to be more competitive and be a leader in this world going forward. So I request maybe first.
So I'll just give you a quick, couple of minutes about what we see. Number one, I'll just give you a quick introduction on Premji Invest. Premji Invest is the biggest VC cum growth equity firm out of India. We're about 16.8 billion in AUM, spread between US and India, out of which US is probably about 7.5 billion in terms of size. Current investments are about 84 companies. In the US, we are very focused on tech and healthcare. And these are the two areas where we thought that we could really add value, and that's where our intellectual strength kind of lay. In other areas, frankly, we didn't have any strength, so we focused on those two. India, we are very broad, and we invest in almost all segments of the economy. So that's broadly about us. Total of about now 57 investing professionals, 3 offices, one in Boston, the other one in San Francisco, the third in Bangalore, and we have a fourth office which is very small, which is mostly for compliance out of Singapore. That's how we are kind of broken up. So, when the buzz first started, and I'll just take you back on my own personal experience. In a way, it's a story of opportunity, it's a story of waste. And I'll cover both. So we first started getting into this way back in 2011 as Wipro. Those days, if you remember, there was Watson around, which came from IBM. So we started a competing platform without any clue as to what we were doing, and we named it Holmes. It was a wonderful marketing gig because Watson was named after Thomas Watson, and Holmes was just a take on that to tell customers, hey, you know what? After all, what did Watson do? He wrote what Holmes did. So we are the real deal. The other guys are pretty useless. That's how it was marketed. But at that point of time, what we also did was to pick up about 130 researchers in the Valley and in the Research Triangle in Raleigh and in India and in London. We had a group running in the University College of London only focusing on this. This group remained, and we were doing some interesting work. In fact, the first work done on anti-money laundering, which is now a product that Google runs, was done by Wipro and HSBC, which later Google bought the intellectual property from us. This is, again, this is a 2015-16 kind of time frame. So it was actually there's a lot of buzz around it at that point of time, and we really used it. It started off as a marketing initiative and then went straight into something where we were doing basic work. A couple of years later, what happened was that, I moved on, a new CEO came in. A couple of years later, there were profitability pressures. So guess what? The first one that went out was long-term thinking. So this entire product got canned. Today, out of those researchers, about 60 of them work in Anthropic, OpenAI, and DeepMind. So that's the kind of loss we have had as a country in terms of just talent. And it's sad in a way, but you know what? That's life. You move on after that. So way back in 2019, when we saw the first GPTs kind of peering out of OpenAI, we actually went to some of our companies. And I remember it's a company which is now public called Navan. And we asked Navan we were using them on an experimental basis. Frankly, it didn't do much. It was only in 23 that we suddenly saw, 23 beginning, we suddenly saw this kind of really getting to a stage where we thought this is something that would really make an impact. So at that point of time, the toss-up was, do we invest in foundation models? Do we invest in people who are going to use the foundation models? Do we invest in semiconductors? Do we do something in terms of algorithms? So we looked at the whole space, and the idea was that we just thought that the risk was just too much, given the valuations that were sitting out there for most of the model companies to invest in them. So we kind of avoided them completely. But what we did was that we invested in a whole bunch of core technologies, both in the semiconductor side, as well as in terms of algorithms, as well as in terms of inference, because we believe that from training to inference, We saw that change happening. So we said, this is the place where we think it makes sense for us to move. And we invested in that. We have made many mistakes, as is expected in the space, but we have done well. But one of the basic things that we have found is initially adoption till about year before last was still slow. Last year, this is 2025, 24 end to 25, we really saw enterprises starting to kind of adopt this. 26, it's now becoming a full-blown move towards using this in areas where it makes impact. And there again, I'd break it up into, if I look at the companies themselves, there are three sets of companies, which includes, let me not call them companies, let me call them organizations, which includes the government. In most cases, governments across the world, until unless it comes to areas like defense, they pretty much don't want to use this. Defense is becoming a big area of opportunity. In fact, recently what we did was that, we had the New York Times reporter who was covering the war in Ukraine. And he was there on the front lines for about 7 months. So he was living in a trench for 7 months where he used to file reports in. And he gave us this fascinating account of how he's seen warfare change in 7 months. So his point was that when he first went there were drones roaming around the place. People used to bury themselves in foliage and then hide from drones. It became so bad as it went along, as months passed by, where there were whole swarms of drones that came in. It is very difficult to avoid a drone. So the body armor changed. And then he figured out that when the US tools, when they started getting deployed on the front lines, how they would train those drones. So he gave us this fascinating account. What happened was that I believe drones come in, a swarm of drones, and they are basically trained on a simulator. The simulator has got intelligence data coming in, satellite data coming in, actual visual data from other drones, and based upon that, they have this thing called the kill ratio. And it's amazing how the objective function itself has now become so specific. So the kill ratio is what is the number of kills that you have without calling back to base and asking for help. 7 months ago, with the war actually, when in the middle of the war, his kill ratio used to be close to about 20%, first time kill. When he left 7 months later, the number was down up to 60%. So only 40% they were calling back because the drones had been trained. And his explanation to us was that, look, body armor changed. We had people who used to wear body armor, flak jackets, now had IR, jackets on. So that could prevent them from drones from kind of recognizing them. So the kind of change in warfare, the cost of warfare itself, of starting a war, has come down substantially. And that is where the first big impact has been seen at scale. There is a parallel to it, and this is the funny part. So if you look at technology changes that have happened over thousands of years, invention of the cannon, invention of the steam engine. And the steam engine itself is a very interesting story. In 1780, there used to be a queen in England called Queen Anne. And she was brought in, they didn't have any heirs to the throne, so she was brought in from Belgium. And when Queen Anne came to the UK, she had a slogan saying, "No wood, no country." Because they had burned all the wood and they couldn't build ships, and without ships, there would never be a maritime power. So it was really bad for them. Discovered peat, came the steam engine. In 1811, there was this whole movement called the Luddite movement, because there were about 300,000 people who were employed at that time in the spinning and weaving industry, and they were being disintermediated by automated spinning. The numbers had come down by about 200,000 people. So what the government at the time did was that they used to organize public hangings for people to kind of watch the spectacle. They used to have one hanging a month. They made it 2 hangings in a week. So it was great fun for people to come and watch these hangings. That's how they kept them entertained, because people were out of work. In about 1820, 1830, there's a formal letter written by the then Prime Minister saying, "Hey, listen, we have so many of these people hanging around. outside London, crime is ripe. It's rampant all around, and we don't know what to do with these guys. So then somebody has written on the side, we don't know who it is, a very simple thing saying that maybe the only solution for this is a war. Between 1840 and 1945, 226 million people lost their lives in wars. And that is the power of technology coming in a way whereby the number of people who were employed in the past, that employment comes down, then you have a whole bunch of idle people sitting around, and that can really cause a whole bunch of social tensions. If you look at the rise of communism, everything happened behind this. So I think we are in a state today where AI models, my own view from whatever I've seen today, in the next year or so, whether we'll hit AGI or not is a kind of a moot point right now. But I think the bigger thing is a significant portion of the work would go away. In the IT industry alone, which employs about 5.8 million people, we've just finished a study with models available till January of this year. We believe with the current state in which we are, we lose about 1.2 million jobs as we speak. With the newer models coming in, we see at least this number doubling. So I think we are sitting at a stage where there isn't enough discussion around this. The AI companies are telling us, look, economic prosperity is going to kind of be all over, less work, more money. That's absolute nonsense. Basic economics tells you that if you don't have income, fundamentally you don't have money to spend. And if you don't have money to spend, where is the economic growth? It might benefit clearly a few people, but a vast majority of people who are sitting there will get affected by this. So I think we are sitting at the cusp of something very big. And frankly, today, we don't have enough debates around it, because I think we are burying our head in the sand and expecting that everything is going to be fine. It isn't. This is going to fundamentally affect our educational system, the ability to get jobs, and I'm sure you know about this, IIT Madras now. A lot of the kids, today are not getting admission and not getting jobs as they pass out of college. In fact, my daughter-in-law, she keeps telling me, so she went to Stanford 5 years ago. So after she passed out of Stanford, she was telling me she had every person in the batch had an average of 20 offers in com science. And the average salary used to be $600,000. Right now, about 11% of the com science batch in Stanford is not yet employed. They don't have a job. They can go and do research, they can go and do startup work on their own. All that is fine, but they're not getting job offers. So that's the state in which we are. And I think the biggest impact is going to be in the whole model of work that we had, which is really an apprenticeship model, that's now being challenged. And I think that's the key to what we have to think about in terms of the going forward. In our minds, with all of us, all the kids around who are coming out, what are they going to do in the future? Sorry, it's been a long-winded.
Thank you for that. Can I request Anil to take up the next preamble part of it?
I had something else planned, but hearing TK talk, I think my mind has now switched all. I want to talk about something else entirely. First of all, thank you for inviting me to what is obviously a very intimate setting for you guys, and to be part of this is a real pleasure. So thank you very much. As TK was talking, I was thinking that for most people in the broader culture, AI has happened in the last 4 years, like post ChatGPT, and TK referred to 2011. That itself is another landmark in the history of AI. But the actual history goes back like 7-8 decades, and maybe kind of what I thought I would like to say is appreciating the fact that this has been a very, very long human endeavor for a variety of reasons, and very little to do with what we are seeing today, which are business interests and technological innovations. There has been the reasons behind why AI even started had to do with our desire to reverse engineer ourselves. So if you look at the beginnings of AI, a lot of them were cognitive psychologists and others who were trying to figure out how the human brain works, and they took and it was Feynman who said, if I can't build something, I can't understand it, or something to that effect. I'm badly paraphrasing it, but you get the picture. And so in the 1950s, I think when machine learning started, it was really with the intention of building things that they could then use to understand maybe how our brains work. So that impetus is still there, and it's one of the reasons why I think we should appreciate the fact that this is not going away. It was never, the momentum, has picked up tremendously in the last sort of decade or so, but this has been a long time coming. So from the 1950s onwards, this has been going on, and there have been, ups and downs in the history of AI. But and also, AI itself is a very, very broad term. For most of us today, AI is just sort of these large language models, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, etc. But that is just one aspect of what the larger field of AI is. And within AI, there are these broad categories called machine learning, which is what we are witnessing now. And there had been for about 2 or 3 decades a competing form of AI called symbolic AI, which fell by the wayside, and today it's kind of very derisively referred to as good old-fashioned AI. But we are already seeing signs that there are limits to what we can achieve with pure machine learning, and we might have to go back to some sort of amalgam of good old-fashioned AI, symbolic AI, and machine learning. So my sense is that, I completely concur with TK about the fact that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. People really don't have a sense for just how disruptive this is going to be. Just to give you an idea, because I mentioned the fact that a lot of effort in AI has been actually to build things that we can reverse engineer to understand the human brain. I'll give you a very rough analogy of where AI models today stand versus the human brain, and then you just extrapolate to what will happen when we do build AI models that start approximating the size and capacity of the brain, right? So today our biggest models have something like, so all these models have these things called parameters which you can tune. So when this model is learning from data, it is these parameters that you have to keep tuning in order for it to learn about statistical patterns that exist in data. And so the biggest models today have about on the order of 1 trillion to 2 trillion parameters. These parameters in the human brain refer to the strengths of the connections between biological neurons. And we have, so if the biggest artificial models have about 2 trillion, we have about 100 trillion in our brain, right? And 100 trillion parameters, this is again a very, very loose sort of connection between what is being done artificially and what is actually happening biologically, because the artificial systems do not capture the complexity of the human brain. And despite that, despite being 2 orders of magnitude smaller, and despite being much simpler than the human brain, they're already at the kind of capacity that you're seeing. Right? So imagine in about 10 years or so, when we have models that have 100 trillion parameters, but they are also being trained on, an internet's worth of data repeatedly, which we can't, like as humans, we don't have access to that kind of data on an individual level. You have the speed of silicon, right? All of these things combined are potentially we are beginning to see what's going to play out already. From what TK said, you get the picture, but this is going to accelerate, because now we have come to the point where these models are now being used to design newer versions of themselves. So that has begun. I wear 2 hats when I think about AI. One is the geek in me, which just finds this absolutely amazing, and the other is the writer in me, and the one more concerned about society, that is absolutely frightened about what's happening. So both coexist in me, and I can, completely lose myself in the details of the neural networks and the math, and then the next moment wake up and say, oh my God, what is all this? So I want to leave you with that, in the sense that, as a preamble, that this has been a long time coming. The momentum had been building up for a long time, and I would almost say that because of this innate curiosity humans have about understanding ourselves, our place in the universe, etc., this was inevitable. This was going to happen. The question is, how do we manage this technology? Because we've come to a point where this technology is literally kind of slipping out of our grasp. So I think that's a discussion we should be having. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Mohan, do you have a different point of view from what the two wise men said?
Yeah, I think that was fairly dark. But let me just talk about my point of view. I am obviously not have experience or have as much knowledge about AI, but I'm talking more in terms of a person who's right out there with access to the tools that are there and how is it making a difference in my life. Right? So I kind of started a little early, being a little geeky and being able to kind of get access to this tool. I've been using Claude for almost a year and a half now, from the early models right down to now where yesterday I was super excited, they launched Opus 4.7. I'm on a $200 max plan, so to say the maximum you can buy. So I'm going to talk about two aspects, and it's going to be a little different from what our esteemed guests have said. The first one is, how has that made a difference to you? I mean, in some ways, I'm non-technical, I'm not an engineer, but as a non-technical guy who is possibly advanced level in terms of using the tools right now, and if you put some effort in, you could get to my level, how does it make a life different? So, and the second is, how is the rest of the peers in my environment addressing this? What are they doing? Right? So, the only way I think of addressing some of the, the worries here is, life will always put us on a cutting board, right? And it's our actions that will decide whether we want to be something that's going to be cut or we want to be part of the knife. So I decided I would be part of the knife. And how does that work? So primarily there are three levels in which AI helps me. How does Claude help me, right? There's a very short term thing where I'm super productive and everybody thinks I'm some super geek, like someone who can do 10 guys work. Because now I don't spend a lot of time doing stuff that I would otherwise do. Like what would take somebody to make a proper Excel model for our businesses, it would take me 2-3 days to do it. Now it takes me half an hour to get the draft and then I do the job that I would do hopefully at the end of 3 days, which verify if this makes sense. What are the key assumptions to do? It's just gone really fast. I always wanted to write. I didn't have the discipline to express my words in a powerful enough way to begin with. It takes a lot. Like you can write your first draft, and I'm sure Anil knows it more than anyone else. But it takes you 10, 15 drafts to get it to that powerful thing where people will actually get it. Now I do it in half an hour. Right? And that allows me to do that. Right? I do that. Third thing, so that's one level. So everybody in my office thinks, ये इतना ज़्यादा काम कैसे कर रहा है? Right? So that's one level. The second level that it's allowed me to do, and this is something that I'm really reveling at. So for the last 4 weeks, I've spent 18 hours working, of which 12 hours has been coding with Cloud Code, right? And the last time I coded was in 1997 in IITM. There's a course called CS 110, which is compulsory for everybody, where you have to learn a language which I think most people, some of us will remember, but most young guys won't, called Pascal. I copied half the assignment and passed through that, and after that I've always been a mechanical engineer, never coded ever. And today, in these 3 weeks, I have built 3 production systems, taken them live, serving 1 lakh customers every 2 weeks, and this has been approved by my engineers, and I didn't know how to code, right? So this is where I got to. So it allowed me to kind of move from my ideas to actually making it real very fast without knowing anything to begin with. And that's where the third piece comes in, where I think is long term. And I'm not talking very long term, I'm talking about how it affects me. The third thing is it helped me, it got me someone who can teach me about stuff which otherwise I would have never known. Like 4 weeks ago, if you said VPS, all I knew was Vada Python Samba. And today I am running 4 virtual servers, virtual private servers. I've been trying very hard to get a GPU because I want to run my own local models. And to tell you the truth, the first time Cloud Code said you should set this up on a VPS,
I said, where? It said, go to Vulture and set it up. I went to Vulture and set it up, and then I was like, what do I do next? It said, send me a screenshot. I sent a screenshot. It said, you see that big blue button? Press that. I pressed it, it went live. From there, so today when I am actually arguing with, some structures, database structures with people, that's how it allows me to do it. Right? So it teaches me a lot, right? So that's how I am looking at it. The second part is, I'm not going to be as intellectually heavy or deep as our colleagues here, but how are people taking it? Now, the company I work in, I work for Orange Health Diagnostics. It's been founded by a lot of us guys from similar backgrounds, IITs and all of that. So we are all good friends, and therefore we are all geeks who want to kind of code if we could, but we are non-technical all of us. So when this whole cloud code thing came up, we wanted to start this whole thing in our company. Everyone should use it. You can solve so many problems, right? And so we gave cloud code to all the leaders. So the question is, okay, you get access to cloud code, not a big deal, $20 a month. What happens after that? What happened? So I'm going to tell you a story I invented along my way here because I thought this is one question that people will ask. So this is a story of a dog, a buffalo, a cow in a shed, and three gentlemen sitting inside a farmhouse, and it starts raining. So the rain is the AI change that you see. The dog, the first thing it did as soon as it started raining was it ran into shelter and suddenly there was no rain. Basically moved to a non-technical job. Something that Claude or software can't touch. Diagnostics, for example. You need a human to take your samples, right? The cow was protected within the shed. It said, when the rain touches me, I will figure it out. In the long term, it is only good for me because there will be more grass which I can eat and make my life easy. A lot of the e-medics who work for us, I've been able to make their life easier by addressing with software some of the needling problems that they have, right? Which earlier was being solved manually, now it's automatic. But their job is not affected. Then there are a lot of buffaloes. They are happy there, chewing their cud, getting wet, which I think was described a lot by TK. They don't know what to do. They'll keep getting wet. They're just chewing their cud, not doing anything. Then we come to the three gentlemen inside, which is, I think three gentlemen are more like us people here. There's one who is watching TV. It's raining outside. पता है यार, बाहर जब जाऊँगा तब सोचूंगा ना. अभी तो movie चल रहा है, देखते हैं. And then there is one person who is actually saying, hey, you know what? It's raining outside. If I have to go outside, I need an umbrella. How do I get an umbrella? How do I know how to open that umbrella? What do I do? He's thinking about all of these things, getting very worried. And he's still figuring out how to get the umbrella. A lot of us, I'm sure, are talking about how do I learn AI? What AI course do I take? Where do I send my son for an AI course? And the third person, who incidentally happens to be the owner of the house, he looks at the rain, and what he does, he runs out and he says, "Mere the potted plants which are in the shade, let me put it in the rain so it at least gets some water. And on the way, I'll figure out how to get out of the rain." The point of view is, I'm the guy who's running the call. So right now, I'm like saying, let me get what I can. And all the people who got this cloud code did exactly this. Some ignored it. Some kept saying, give me a course and then I will start. But the guys who really made real impact were guys who said, let me figure out what problem to solve and how to use this AI to do that. It's just another tool. So it was not like, if some of you have used Excel for my diagnosis.
You will only charge to get the diagnosis after this.
Yeah. So my biggest learning from there, if you were to tell me in a very one sentence, what is it? Some of you would have used Excel. Have you guys used Excel? So there's this formula called VLOOKUP. So a lot of us do this course on VLOOKUP, right? But in reality, the time you actually learned VLOOKUP was not when you did the course. It was when you had half an hour left and you had to submit that report and you looked at Google and tried it out once. And after you tried it out once, you learned how to do VLOOKUP all your life. In my book so far, my experience has been AI is similar. First find the problem that you want to solve, a real life problem. Use AI for it. It could be your holiday booking. When I planned a trip for Japan, it planned it beautifully. And so on. So I'll just stop there.
You did fulfill my request to be different from the other two. Thank you so much. So I'm going to now get into a slightly more focused three questions, and then we get into the Q&A with the audience. And the three questions actually I've already outlined to you guys, but I'm going to kind of say the first question for the sake of the audience here. And in this, I'm going to make a very basic value, I guess, statement, if you will, a tenet of life, if you will, that as human beings, we need to add value to humanity. That's an assumption that I'm making. It may or may not be correct. I can hear it, man. It's good enough.
It's clear against the
Oh, not clear. Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now better? Okay, sorry. So I'm going to make a basic statement that as human beings, we need to add value to humanity. Not everybody needs to do it, but at least the people in this room should take this as a basic tenet of life. If you, from that point of view, and I'm going to make the other observation, which we don't need to, from the based on what everybody said and what Mohan has said very eloquently, which is the fact that AI can add value to our lives going forward forever, and etc. etc. is obvious. I don't think we would debate that point again for that in this group at least. So having said that, then the question becomes, is this rapid implementation of AI versus measured adoption, from the point of view of our ability to as human beings to add value to humanity, is there a tension going on between this rapid adoption versus a measured adoption? And that's the question I would like these three gentlemen to address, because I know for a fact lots of people lose jobs. That's what TK has said. That's a different matter. We'll come back to, we can also talk about that. How can those people who may be outside this room add value to humanity? And maybe it's up to us to create those opportunities, possibly. But I'll stop there saying that my main thrust of the question is this rapid implementation of AI versus measured adoption, the tension between the two. What are your thoughts on it? Is there a way that you think we, as a group, as an individual, or whatever, that we could be taking action? Anil, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I'm totally in agreement with the fact that AI as a productivity tool right now is very, very amazing. But that is, to me, not at odds with what TK was saying, which is also that, the reason why some people today, especially those who are domain experts, right, who are using AI and becoming more productive, the reason for that is they are actually very good at what they do.
Okay, this one seems to be. What I was saying was that I do agree with Mohan's perspective that it is an extraordinary productivity tool, but the reason why people today are finding themselves using AI and finding themselves to be more productive, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're already very, very good at some of the things that they're doing, right? I mean, like if you are a trained engineer, there's a lot of things that you've already learned from the ground up, and I would not be surprised if in the coming years, and this is the thing that we have to watch out for in terms of how fast we adopt this technology or how slow we go, is most of us have learned things the hard way, as interns, as this is what you were mentioning, and if that goes away, if that early learning phase where we, whether it's learning Excel formulas, from the ground up, whatever it is that you're learning, then building up some kind of domain knowledge and then using that domain knowledge to be an effective user of AI, that initial part is under threat. And I do not think we should ignore that at all, because coming, in about 10, 15 years, we might have a whole coterie of youngsters coming up who do not have the kind of expertise that is necessary to be productive users of AI. And so I would, at this point, argue for a measured adoption where we start thinking about how we build up basic expertise in other areas, whether it's math or writing. I mean, as a writer, I can tell you that it doesn't take very long. I've spent 25 years or so writing for a living, and there's a certain amount of understanding of language and how to convey ideas in words that has become ingrained in me. That can go away very quickly if I were to just use AI for that. And so as of now, I refuse to use AI for my writing. I have no problems using AI for things like teaching myself maths. And this is where you were referring to AI as a tool to learn new things. So we have to be really careful about certain cognitive skills that we value, whether it is skills, whether these are skills that give our lives meaning or whether we use these skills to provide value to society. We will have to hold on to some things and not give that up, because once we give it up, we all know how easy it used to be to drive around Bangalore without a GPS, and now I cannot go like 50 meters without having to look at my phone, and that's an enormous skill that is gone. In the case of GPS, it's not very consequential, but the pace at which these things are happening with all other kinds of skills, I think we have to be a little careful about how measured or how rapid this adoption is going to be.
Thank you. I'm going to ask TK next because he runs a large business, he invested in many businesses, and I think that's where this is probably going to, you will face this question the most. Because you'll say, I need to have a commercial advantage versus worrying about if people are learning or not, the early learning part.
So, we've grappled with this within. Because about 3 years ago, we set up a tech team on our own, and the idea was that any investment that we do, we go through a formal process for it. One is that we go through a discovery process. Who are the companies out there that we want to invest in? So a lot of that research is today done by associates, whose basic job is to kind of go through, scan through all the different companies that are coming up, look at company formations, look at the founders, movement of one founder from one company, are these sold to the next company. So this entire thing that we look at in terms of movement of founders, where is capital going, capital formations both in US and in India, it is all done by associates. And there's it's an objective function which is very clearly defined behind that. So we said everything to do with discovery, let's do it using a machine, because our own view was anything that's got an objective function that is verifiable can be replaced by a machine. It was as simple as that. That's how we started. So we did that for discovery, what we call discovery. And then after we discover it, we go through several stages. We go through 3 stages before it comes to the investment committee. And so stage 1 is basically, doing basic work on the industry. So we used to take time, put associates behind it, and our idea was, can we accelerate this whole thing by not by a factor of 1 or 2, but can we accelerate by 30 times? That's the target that we took. We were quite amazed to see as models evolved, we were quite surprised to see what happened. And we found that up to stage 3 of our investment memo could be written by a machine. Then if you look at financials when they come out, that also, it can do comparisons with people in the industry, they can figure out market opportunity, all that can do for you today. That also was kind of built in, what we call monitoring. I think about middle of last year, we finished the platform and everybody was using it. And it was kind of funny because then we found when we go and ask people, okay, why do you think this is a great investment? They begin to struggle. They don't know how to answer it. So the concept of what is called as cognitive download to the machine, which Anil was talking about, is very, very real, and we see it every day. So now we have changed our entire process. We have said every part of the memo that comes out, there has got to be a para that's written by a human being on why they think what is done by the machine is right and why they think it's wrong. And why they think they should have a different opinion. They're forced to write it down. And we find majority of people struggle through it. Because the reason is our educational system has taught us to fundamentally reproduce what has been written in a book, there's very little original thinking that remains today. I mean, when all of us grew up in school, I mean, I can talk about myself. We used to have what is called as a hobbies class. I don't know whether you guys had it when you passed out, which was, so all of us chose, I chose chemistry. And I remember from class 7 to class 10, I was trying to make a bomb. So we were desperate. So we used to use.
There's a whole theme of bombs and war in your.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully, I know my voice around here. So it's kind of funny, but that taught us so much. And then, so that the whole idea of creativity, and once you infuse that people when they're young, I think it creates a complete sense, it creates a completely new vector. It sets your mind thinking.
Mind a little.
I think it's gone. So I think that was the biggest challenge that we see today. This cognitive download that we talked about is a real problem. And now 6 months after that, now we are finding that about 30 to 40% of the population can actually do original work. But a vast majority of them still can't. And these, by the way, are people who are probably top of the class in the engineering school, top of the class when it comes to management schools, all had great experience in investing, but their ability to articulate on what the future is going to look like and why this company should have value in the future, they can't do it. So that's, I think, the challenge that we have today. So it is a tension.
Thank you for that, TK. I was hoping to hear that, and from you as well, Anil. Thank you for that. Now, I want to hear whether Mohan has a different point of view, or you don't really care about others learning in the organization and developing the kind of the cognitive skills that you need, maybe even empathy, maybe even understanding human interactions when you make some managerial decisions, and maybe you reading body language of people as you make a decision about how to allocate work and so on. Do you think about those things at all?
No, I think it would be very naive and amateurish to say it doesn't matter.
No, I said, do you think about it at all? It
Yeah, it does. We do think about it. And I'll tell you even more, like you saw me as a very enthusiastic proponent of the tool and saying, I want to be part of the knife and all that. But the reality is this, right? I am at the crux of where I did the groundwork, the apprenticeship, and therefore I have what is called the judgment. Now, and when I see the same tools used by younger folks in my own company, they don't have a judgment to see and figure out what that machine gave, because it sounds very, very nice, very well structured, but it can be like complete bunkum, right? And that judgment is still human judgment, right? And in fact, the sharper and deeper you have that judgment, you need a higher level of that judgment to cut through all this really nicely. Like if someone came to you and had a gap in 2 or 3 sentences, sounded very underconfident, you would judge him very fast, saying maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? But if someone came to you and spoke very eloquently, very nicely, put in a few jargon words, unless you're really sharp and you really know what you're talking about, what he's talking about, you will not cut through the crap to get to it. In fact, that is becoming even more difficult now, right? So I think, like, irrespective of whether some of the top things that we talk about are long term or short term, and when I spoke earlier, I talked more in terms of a very short to intermediate term, the next 5 years, what's going to happen, how am I going to take advantage of it. They've been talking about a more long term thing, but here's the part, right? The risk that we are talking about in terms of losing skills, losing judgment, which is built over time, which is built over finally doing these things, is a problem even in the next 6 months. Forget about the rest. Because a whole bunch of people, like for example, are giving out this machine blah, and people who are not aware of it don't necessarily are not able to judge unless you're really good at it. So I think judgment is something that we will really have to figure out. And that's where knowing your business, having done it without this tool, is important.
Thank you for that, Mohan. So I heard the word, earlier TK mentioned about the system of education that we have in India and how it doesn't help you to think creatively. You just reproduce stuff. Okay, that's an age-old problem. And now it's going to be further accentuated by the current AI tools that we're going to have, right? So the point here is, what do we do about it with our educational system, in schools, in colleges, and maybe even in companies as well, right? You mentioned one or two things, TK, about what you're trying to do within Premji Invest on how to get people to think for themselves and form and maybe learn to have a judgment. Any thoughts starting with Anil on this point?
About how we should be.
How we should, and primarily,
In terms of the capabilities of AI, but I'm thinking like when it comes to schools and how we should be thinking about education itself.
Yeah.
One of the things that doesn't get talked about much is that learning, a lot of things that we learn is an embodied, it has an aspect of being embodied like physically in our bodies. So there is something about the act of learning that has very much to do with the fact that we are embodied creatures. We are not simply cognitive animals. There's a lot of learning that happens because of the way our bodies work. And early education has to really pay attention to that. If we start depending on technology alone to sort of teach people whatever they need to learn and ignore this other multidimensional aspect of what it means to be human and what it means to learn as a human, we're going to miss out on some extraordinary abilities that we have as a species. And I would say that early education really needs to think very, very clearly about how much AI-enabled education should come in the first 10 years or so of education. Yes, eventually, they can all learn to use it as a tool, but there's something else that has to be thought through very clearly. Right now, there seems to be a rush to adopt it because everyone is kind of afraid of losing out on this. And also in the Indian context, because we are dealing with the large population where teachers are scarce, this seems like an extraordinary opportunity to bring knowledge to students. But knowledge is not learning. Knowledge alone is, learning how to learn is a huge skill that doesn't come from machines as of now. And so there are a whole bunch of other dimensions to learning that are, at this point at least, being ignored in the industry when it's just looking at AI as a tool to enhance education. So I would say, again, I'm taking a cautionary note. This is weird for me because I really do love AI. I've written a book on it, so it's something I find really amazing as in terms of what has happened, but also watching the effects that it has on our cognition. One of the things that one of the effects that it has when it makes sort of our work a little bit seamless. So when you're struggling with the problem that you need to solve, we have already seen studies where it has been shown that when people use AI assistants to learn something or to do some task versus a control group that is persisting despite the difficulty, it's that part of human sort of cognition that persists despite the friction to solve a problem. That's also a cognitive skill that needs to be learned. And if you're just using an AI assistant to do whatever it is that you're doing, you actually are shortchanging yourself by not being able to live with the discomfort of not knowing, not being able to solve a problem in the short term, persisting with it. So this thing that people would call grit, all of these things are in danger. So I don't know if this answers your question, but I just feel like striking a cautionary note while extolling the amazing achievements of what's happened in AI.
TK?
So I kind of agree with Anil on this. And let me just look at our educational system, the way we've kind of laid it out. Okay, the educational system in our country is to a large extent run by the states based upon a policy which is dictated by the center. That's how it typically runs politically. If you go back and look at the basis of education, when we wanted to, way back in the 1900s, when we wanted to kind of bring education into the masses, we basically adopted a production system, and which was really in a way formulated by Taylor, and we brought that and imposed that on education. So what happens is that, think about class 1 to class 12. Think about that as an assembly line. Class 1, you pass, you go to class 2. Class 2, you pass, you go to class 3. Somewhere in this whole process, it became one of passing stages. The learning that we really had came up in the workplace, that when we went to the workplace. Because there we found that what we had learned in school and college, you had to kind of adapt that, and you had to pick up from the other people around you on what would be useful to the work on hand. That became the model which we applied, and that's what in a way shaped us. I think today, if you look at it, the educational model that we used in school, even when we were there, if you remember, we used to have, like I said, hobbies. We used to have games. It taught us that we had to kind of interact with each other for an objective. And it was something that was ingrained in us. For example, I still remember when I was in school, I never used to finish my exams because I had to go and play marbles, because that was far more interesting. So I used to do enough for 60 marks and run out to play marbles. But that's part of learning. And that's part of interacting with other people in the group to understand what's important for them. My objective functions are different. Their objective functions are different. But we managed to kind of come together. I think today as human society in all came together for us in our workplace once we came out of the educational system. That is, I think, the biggest threat we're going to have. Because the number of people who are going to be there are going to be less. For example, we have a company called, and this is surprising numbers, we have a company called Base 10, which works in the space of inference in the US. They have 9 employees. This year revenue is 400 million. Right? So now think about it. These are the new companies that are coming up. There are about 11 new companies we've invested in right now. Average revenue would be between 0 to 50. Founding team and everybody else put together is less than 10. So the new enterprise is going to be much smaller in terms of the number of people who are employed. And then, I was in the Reserve Bank of India day before yesterday. So I was asking the governor, so tell me, with AI coming in, what the hell are you doing? He was like, no, nothing is going to affect us. We're going to be fine. I was like, man, can you imagine? It is, because this is going to be, this is going to be new skills that we have to learn. We'll learn those new skills and move on. So I think the concept of job losses, I don't think it's actually struck our political masters. And that, I think, is the worry.
I think, can you give me the mic? If you don't. I think we've had a lovely conversation, and I think the audience is more eager to ask you questions at this point of time. And it's been a lot of interesting. I think I would like to ask 100 more questions, actually, if you ask me. And so this could be continued, but this is the first talk. And truly, you all deserve to ask questions of this eminent set of wise men here. Now, the only request I have is please identify yourself with just your name and maybe your occupation and nothing more. And maybe you can say what your favorite food is if you want to. And then ask a question, not give a narrative and a story. Right? It should be a question. And if you want to have a follow-up question, you can ask that question only if there is time left over. Rules are clear? Otherwise, I'll be interrupting you guys if you... Okay. Now, Abhinay is going to circulate. He's got a couple of mics. And I'll pass this to the eminent panelists here, as and when they need it. And please say whether you want to ask this question to the entire panel or just to one specific person. Either way is okay.
Hi, Gopi here. I work at Microsoft, coming in from Hyderabad, so biryani obviously. My son is 11 years old, and one of my biggest worries is, what do I optimize his learning for? Is it to kind of address the ever diminishing problems with the cognitive excesses that are coming in through machines? Is it to kind of sit aside, admire all of this cognitive functions that the machines are going to get and be humbled about it? Or is it, do I prepare him, as I came for the talk today, should I now prepare him for what? What are your thoughts?
More questions for you.
So, honestly, I don't know how to answer the question because I think, till now what we did was that we as parents set an objective function for our children. Okay. I think we are now reaching an age or a time when the children themselves have to decide on what they are good at and what they want to be. It's a very different mindset change. And at 11, it's difficult for you to decide what you want to be, right? For example, you might want to be a pilot or an engine driver or who knows what it is. But I think the key here is that the skills of the jobs of the future and the way we see jobs panning out, it may not be the same as what we had. It may be a completely different paradigm that's going to hit you. The only surviving paradigm that has kind of survived through many changes through evolution has been the fact that commerce has been the basis of everything that we've done. It's been the growth of society. To a large extent, teach the child survivability with commerce as an underpinning whereby he can gain his livelihood. That is broadly it. I wouldn't do anything more than that. Because it's very difficult today to sit and judge other than, by saying functions which touch people that you do with your hands. I mean, if you want to become a doctor, a carpenter, those will always remain. It's very unlikely that, robots would come and take that away at least in the next 20, 30 years. They might after that. But today it will not. So those are the other skills. But if the kid doesn't have the aptitude for that, then it's no use pushing the child into that particular area. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with TK. The other thing I would say is just take a kind of a meta perspective on, one of the things that is happening in the modern information age is that our attention is getting hijacked. So I can see that in myself, and for children it's even more damaging. So if anything that you can do to kind of teach them how to persist with attending to one or a few things for a length of time, right? Because with that will come adaptability. If they have to solve a problem that they haven't encountered, if they are unable to pay attention, then the rest of the thing just falls apart. So I would say just focus on that aspect where their cognitive ability to attend to something just remains with them and doesn't get fragmented with all of this technology that is around us. That might serve them more than anything else, because as TK was saying, we really can't anticipate how society is going to change. So you want to look at the kind of metacognitive skills that need to be in place in order for them to tackle just about anything that might happen.
Thank you. I'm going to request Sadhana, next is the lady and then the gent.
Gender diversity, I guess.
What will AI do to that? I don't know.
Let's wait. Thank you all for this lovely, insightful talk for somebody like me who's a new entrant into this field. So thanks for that. I'm Sadhana Rao. I'm a curator in the arts and cultural spaces. And my favorite food is the Delhi chaat and the Bombay bhel, my go-to food. My question is to you, Anil. I'm very intrigued by a statement that you made, which is about that when you go to your writing, you do not use AI. What's the reason for this fidelity to the process of writing on your own without having authored a book on AI?
I think the answer to that question for me is that it goes back to the reason for why I became a writer in the first place. It was really a desire to pay attention to the world. I was a software engineer and I transitioned to becoming a writer, and it was really just to pay deep attention to whatever is happening around me and somehow bring all that attention onto page. And the act of writing for me is very meaningful for me personally, right? So I would hate to give up this meaning making activity. I find, like, for instance, there are people, if you talk to some artist who's making, let's say, a painting or doing some pottery, for them, the act of doing that is as important as the final product, right? And for me, writing has that aspect to it. So yes, I could potentially use AI to generate the final product, but I would have lost out on the process. And the process is the one that brings my life meaning. So I would not want to give that up. And I've said this in a couple of other forums also, but I think we have, and this again goes back to what TK brought up very early on, we have a crisis of meaning that is going to come, because once a lot of us are going to be deprived of this very human activity of doing something because it feels meaningful to us in a very individual sense, if those things are taken away for whatever reason, that will be a crisis in society, and that may have ramifications that we don't yet fully understand. So I'm at this, as of now, I'm just holding on to that one thing that makes my life meaningful, and I'll see how long I can hold on.
It's meditative. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful answer.
Hi.
Thank you, Anil, for that.
Sanjeev Sareen here. I retired from industry and now I'm a leadership coach and now a published author, which is on spiritual and integrating with corporate life. Talking about foods, I'm a good Punjabi, but I love idli dosas, good South Indian. I had a fascinating conversation about 3 weeks back. There was a global conference in Prestige Golfshire with all the who's of gurus on world economy, which way it's going. To me, that conversation was like a fairy tale, and I'm going to repeat what I heard, and I want to get views from anybody over here. The path which you all have shared, that there's going to be redundancies, all that is happening. He took it a step further and said about 10-15 years from now, people will not have jobs, okay? But the government will be the one who will be distributing money, keeping you alive and all that. And so I asked him, where will all these people whose work has gone, what will they be doing? He said, Sanjeev, 15 years from now, you are going to see civilization go back to where it was hundreds of years ago, where it is interacting with communities, spending time on the arts, contemplating, doing all those things, because all this other part is taken care of. Are there any views on this? This came a very, very senior industry person.
I don't know how to answer that, because it's always been, at least a dream, all of us, when we started our careers, our dream to get paid without doing anything. That's always something that we always loved, right? Well, I'm not sure about that, because I think what's going to happen is there is going to be a very sharp distinction between the people who have it and the people who don't, and that's going to happen because humans by themselves, by their very nature, are competitive and selfish. That's the basis of humanity itself. Because if we were not selfish and we were not competitive, we wouldn't have been the species that we are. We would have probably died somewhere down the line. So I think is the very basis of what we are. Will governments hand out doles? Probably. We're already doing that plenty in the country. But now, how much more can it go out to? Can we afford it? Ultimately, when you give out doles, you need to have taxation in place. You can't have just the giving out side without the revenue side. And the revenue side is highly uncertain right now. If you look at our taxation system is based upon income and consumption. If income is hit because there's no jobs, and consumption is hit because people don't have money to buy, where is taxation going to come from? And where are the doles going to come from? So I think there's a fundamental issue economically in that statement. So I don't think the governments have the authority. Now, if you're sitting in some parts of the world where you have plenty of money, then you can probably do it for some time, but you can't do it forever. And by the way, there's a parallel to it. And this is actually quite interesting. So I read a lot of history. So in, there used to be a famous Roman emperor. I forget the guy's name actually, come to think of it. In 300 BC, and very famous name, the guy who wrote many books actually. Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, that's right. Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius wrote, when he died, his succession was kind of a little shaky because he gave it to his son. Marcus Aurelius was known to be probably one of the best Roman emperors ever. Prosperity was so high in the Roman Empire where no taxes were paid by anybody. And very few people worked because they used to get doles from the government. And they used to get land and everything else. Only proposition was they had to go and serve in the army for 7 years. After Marcus Aurelius died, there were 5 emperors that came after that. And then what happened was the Huns came in. The Huns were the invaders. They came in and destroyed what was then Rome. And it happened because people were idle. People didn't have work to do. They didn't know how to fight. So they got taken over. And then in between, when the Huns came in, there's a very famous statement that there used to be geese on the walls of Rome, which used to warn people of invaders. And I believe the geese screamed, and then the Romans came out and fought the Huns. That is the story. And the Huns were defeated. The reality is that they had no wherewithal to fight the Huns. So what they did was they went outside the gates, got the Hun general, made him an honorary Roman, and brought him into the city. Yeah. Right? So that's been the reality of the past. So if you have long periods of time when people are idle, they don't have enough work, then what happens is empires collapse, civilizations collapse. So I don't think remaining idle is an option, and getting doles from the government is something that we can look forward to, given our current state in India at least.
Any thoughts?
This has been talked about in the context of AI a lot. It's called universal basic income. And there's also a lot of worry about the fact that this is just a narrative that is pushed by the AI companies, because they are going to benefit tremendously, right? And the way the narrative goes is that there will be so much wealth that is generated by this technology that somehow there will be an incredible benevolence in terms of the government that will end up distributing money to the rest of the population who don't need to work. I think it's fiction. It's partly, at least at the way it looks right now from the outside, and some of this is just a narrative that the AI companies want told so that there is no societal objection to what is happening. And I think we need to be careful. I personally feel that as a human beings with no work will find it very difficult, regardless of how much money is coming in. Because I think we do get some sort of meaning in our lives from what we do, whatever that might be, and a lot of it is tied to just survival. The species, fundamentally in an evolutionary sense, a biological organism gets its meaning by having to do the things it needs to do to survive. And if you take away that impetus, I don't know what will happen. I don't think anybody knows.
Thank you, Anil. Mohan, do you have a confident view on this?
Oh, hello.
No, okay, good.
Okay.
I think we have convinced Mohan to come to our show.
Naren Telang, HPS 79 batch. I'm a finance guy, worked in IT companies, including once upon a time Wipro. And my question is to you, and you'll have to excuse that it may not be very tech or precise. You mentioned about 1 trillion parameters currently in AI, going to
100 trillion or whatever it is for human. So first part of the question is it all computational? That all the whatever human cognition, knowledge, whatever, is it all computational that you increase it from 1 trillion to 100 trillion and then it can do anything a human does? The second part is that second part of the question is, are there milestones you are seeing in the development of AI? Now, as a layman, I can understand that the face recognition was done, pattern recognition, then LLM and whatever. Are there milestones you're seeing in the development of AI which at some stage you'll say, okay, human intelligence reached or exceeded?
So the second question first, we are already seeing in very narrow domains machines having exceeded human capacities, right? So the term that is used these days when we talk of LLM based AIs is jagged intelligence as opposed to artificial general intelligence or anything like that, where these things are very, very good at certain things and pretty bad at other things. Like if you take a large language model and ask it to do some amazing proof of mathematics, it's very good, but ask it to do simple arithmetic and it fails badly. So depending on what aspect of sort of a cognitive ability you're looking at, machines have already gone past. In a general sense, no. So humans have this extraordinary capacity to tackle a certain problem, abstract out the knowledge that is necessary to solve that problem, take that abstraction and then apply it to a completely different domain. So we might learn to solve a problem in one domain, we somehow sort of synthesize our understanding and then use that understanding to solve something else entirely. Machines don't do that. And this is a problem in AI called generalization, and they don't generalize as well as humans do, so that remains an issue. Will it be solved? I see absolutely no in principle reason why it won't be solved, right? If you take, as I do, as a lot of scientists would also do, if you take the perspective that what is happening in our brains, this goes back to your first question about is everything computational? In some way of defining computation, yes. What is happening even in our bodies, not just the brain, but the entire complex of brain and body, what the system is doing is some form of computation. There are debates about this and people will fight over this, but depending on how loosely you define computation, you can argue that that's what's happening. And if that is the case, if with a big if, with big caveats, then there is no in principle reason why we cannot design machines that will also do that. So, and then it will simply, it may not be a simple question of just scaling up from 1 trillion to 100 trillion, because that, that particular way of thinking applies to large language models as they are being built today, and we are already seeing that these things are kind of getting saturated, that scaling them up may not get us anywhere, anything more than what we've already got. But there are other things that are in the pipeline in terms of how we build AIs that are going to replicate some of the things we know about how brains work, the energy efficiency of the brain, this generalization aspect I talked about. All these things are in the pipeline, and so the AIs 10 years from now might look very different, and we don't quite know how that will turn out. So I hope, does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you. I know Sudhir is waiting, but okay, I'm glad that there are questions from this side as well.
No, you didn't see the side.
Okay.
I have the mic, so can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I have the
so,
mic.
No, we're going to move actually to this side, and then we'll come back to this side, just to balance it out. I think we need to have more.
There's a question to Anil. I'm Vijaya, by the way. I work for IBM. So when you said Watson, in fact, I felt very good. The question is what do you think the impact of AI on environment? On environment.
Environment. So that is a big concern right now. with the way LLMs are, built and trained and used. So, like for instance, I just mentioned one of the amazing things about the human brain is that it works off 20 watts of power. Right? I mean, it's really amazing. Whereas an LLM, if you look at these large frontier models, it can take tens or hundreds of megawatt hours of energy, right, to train a frontier model, and it's just off the charts energy consumption. Definitely a concern if this is the way AI is going. But there are simultaneously efforts afoot in the research community to figure out how we build, models that are going to replicate the energy efficiency of human brains. So, if things continue as they are, the environmental footprint is going to be quite drastic and not sustainable. But I also think that people are aware of this, and anyone who cracks the sort of research question of how do we make AIs as efficient as human brains, and then that solves that problem, at least for the short term, but then increases all the other problems, because once you make an AI that is energy efficient and so much more powerful than human brains, then it's not like people are just suddenly going to use less energy. They're going to take the same amount of energy that we're using now and just use more and more of it. So I think the problems remain, but the short answer is the environmental concerns are an issue right now.
Okay, we'll go to Raj and then go back to this side. Yep. And then back to Sudhir here.
Thank you. I'm Raj. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in telecom and tech, and I'm not going to talk about my favorite food, but my favorite color, which is yellow for obvious reasons, Vijayanagar. Okay. Okay, I was going to ask the same question about, I think I've got your book, which I bought about 6 months back, and you said then when you wrote the book that there was a raging debate about whether machines are just AI machines are just doing glorified pattern matching, or are they reasoning and grokking? So I suppose that debate is settled now and not yet.
So machine learning technically still remains pattern matching, right? I mean, the question is what can you do with the statistics of the patterns in the data? And we are seeing that as we have scaled up these models, the sophistication of the patterns that have been learned by these machines are now capable of doing certain kinds of reasoning. Absolutely. So while the baseline still remains, learning patterns in data, the use of these patterns that have been learned has become much more sophisticated, right? So the grokking example that you talk about, that still holds true only for small models. We don't yet know whether large language models are grokking, things like that. But I mean, it's one of the surprising things about large language models has been that when you just look at the way they are trained, they literally are just learning about patterns that exist in language, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a 1 billion parameter model or a 1 trillion parameter model. The training regimen is exactly the same. Nothing fundamentally changes in the math. And yet, as these things get bigger, the sophistication of the patterns they learn as they get bigger makes possible or makes emergent behaviors that were not expected, and that has been quite surprising, and that trend might continue for a while.
But even at this level, you talked about that Modulo 97.
Yeah, that's a toy model. That's a toy model. Yeah, that's literally a 2-layer transformer, very, very small, where you can analyze the network at such depth. You can't do that with LLMs anymore. I mean, they're so big, we don't really know how to analyze what's going on inside.
Okay. One. Yeah.
Prasanna, and then we go to...
Yeah. See, I have a question. I am Prasanna from 85 batch. I like well-made tamarind rice and curd rice. My question is, AI is basically doing things from how you train it. So, and learnings. So what happens to the experimentation and the discoveries which have come from human beings across the civilization? Will it all just go down, or you will be just doing what it's supposed to be done the best way and done?
All future Nobel Prizes will be won by AI.
What happens is whatever it's contextualized in text and based upon whatever questions you've asked, in a way what happens is patterns are created where the machine can give you outputs which somewhere in a way assimilates what is, I'm just simplifying it as much as I can, can give you outputs that can kind of, in a way, assimilate learnings of the past in the context of the question that you're asking today. That's fundamentally what it does. Now, in many cases for scientific research, I would think that you still need to have that originality. Because if you don't if you go back and see some of the biggest scientific theories that have come out, people have got some sense of what a ultimate outcome would look like. Their job is to go back and look for evidence to support it. Right? So, theory of relativity, for example, came that way, where Einstein had a concept that this might be happening. He had to go back and look at evidence to back up, and the maths behind it to back up and support that. I think that will never go away from a human being. Right? Going back to writing, if you don't ultimately go through the experience of writing, you'll never have something that you believe is kind of different. Look at the number of letters that you get generated today by Claude. Whenever a letter comes to me generated by Claude, I don't even reply to it. I just dump it.
You should just give it to Gemini and ask him.
No. I have a very simple answer that goes back. Thank you for using this to generate letter. Whenever you're ready to write a letter to me, which is not generated by AI, let me know. I'll reply to it. So that's what I do. So I would think that's the answer.
I just wanted to. This is a very interesting question when it comes to science and discovery, etc. Right? And I completely agree with TK. Current state of AI is such that, like, if you, for instance, take Einstein's theory of relativity. If you take all of the knowledge that existed until 1915 and you trained a large language model based on that data, and then ask the question, can it come up with Einstein's theory of general relativity? Today the answer is no, right? But I'll give you a counter example of something that I talked about recently. There are experiments that are being done with a different kind of AI. So this is why I think it's important not to think of AI just as some monolithic thing called large language models. There are a whole bunch of other ways of thinking about what machines do. And so there is one effort that involves, for instance, bear with me a little bit, I'll explain this. It has to do with doing quantum optics experiments. So when quantum optics physicists do experiments, they do it on an optical bench, where on the optical bench you'll have different sort of, there'll be lasers, there'll be mirrors, all sorts of, experimental apparatus. And they have to figure out how to connect these various bits and pieces of the apparatus they have in order to perform a certain experiment. They might have light coming in from the input side, and on the output side you want light or photons coming out in a certain quantum state or something, right? They have figured out how to take the experiment that is described on an optics bench on a physical bench in the form of a graph, where the graph represents these bits and pieces like the lasers and the quantum states of photons that are being exchanged between some mathematical way of representing it, and there is some physics sort of knowledge that is baked into the way this graph is built, right? But once you have built a graph of a certain size, let's say 100 by 100 graph, then that graph in theory contains all of the possible experiments that you can do with equipment of that size. And then they have built an optimization procedure. TK has used the word objective function a lot, and that's exactly what it is. That they design an objective function for this graph and basically optimize that thing to figure out what is the best possible configuration of your apparatus on the optical bench that gives me the result that I want, right? And remember, this thing has not been trained on data. It has not seen any data. All that is there is some physics knowledge about how these things interact with each other. And when they do the optimizations, these machines find experiments that have surprised humans, the configurations. They have ended up finding configurations of optical bench experiments that the physicists themselves will tell you, we could not have thought about that even if we had stared at it for 20 years, right? And this one amazing result that came out of all this was You've heard of the LIGO observatory that detected gravitational waves about 10 years ago and now is continually detecting gravitational waves, which are the ripples in space-time itself. So there's a team in Caltech which is responsible for optimizing this detector, and they are now in the process of optimizing it for the next generation that they're going to build. And in the meantime, on the side, they've been using this AI to try and figure out how to optimize the LIGO detector. And the designs that the AI has come up with are so weird and so different from what humans might have done. It has already improved the sensitivity of the detector 10 to 15% more than their best efforts. Their best efforts took them a decade of work. This thing did it in like 6 months of work, right? And this is not an AI that has seen patterns in data. Very different way of doing it. So to answer your question, things are changing and we're not quite sure where this is going. This is a big question in the scientific community about whether AI will actually do discovery. As of now, no, but we're on the cusp of something that is hard to say where it will fall.
Just just a follow on this discussion, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Brigadier Anil Ananthaswamy. I work in the army. So taking this discussion in terms of this discovery process and connecting it with previous discussions which we had on whether we get laid off or people get have no work or children will not have that kind of cognitive ability to discover new patterns or whatever it may be. So do you see that in times to come, the models or the data points that the artificial part of the intelligence requires, which is coming from the intelligence part, will not be there for it to get better at the same pace at what we are seeing it now? Because that is based on our past experience, knowledge, which is out there. And just a matching thing, do we in India have that kind of power systems to generate this kind of artificial intelligence in-house? As of now, probably most of it is outside India. The infrastructure, I mean.
I think the latter question right now, India is building up its strength in this. I think the frontier models right now are mainly the domain of the US and China, but that's changing, I think. I mean, there are so many factors that go into it, and TK would be a better place to answer that. But I'll take the first part of the thing where there is a definite concern about, the AIs that we have today have been trained on all of the human knowledge that we have generated and put into text. And there's already this concern that the new generation of AIs are being trained on their own, the data that they are generating. There is this whole idea of AI slop. You would have heard of it, whether it's in image generation or videos or text. There's a certain lack of diversity in the data that is being generated. So there is definite concern. There's a very evocative phrase that is used in the AI community to describe this process. It says that AI might end up choking on its own exhaust, right? How true that is, that it's as a research problem, it's not a given, because synthetic data generation itself is a research field, and it's possible that AI might be able to bootstrap itself out of this problem. We don't know the answer yet.
Yeah.
So the India part of it is, we've got some initiative starting from the government around this, but we're still far away. In fact, if I look today, between this world is kind of divided into two camps. One is the US camp and the other one is China camp. There's nothing in between. Very few other countries have got anything which is of scale on frontier models, especially today. Are they working on it? Yes. Will they get there? Probably yes. Europe has got one big model that they're all betting on called Mistral, which they've been kind of working on for some time. But it's today broken up between these two, between the US and China.
Thank you. Next, to request Sudhir, then Vandana, and then Akshay.
I like actually to drink before I eat. What do you sense? Because most automation waves have definitely had a great improvement on productivity. literacy goes up. Those are, if you look backwards, the last 500 years also. But do we compute deflation and its sort of impact in the next 10, 20 years? Like, how will we actually deal with deflation? Whole bunch of seriously deflationary aspects will take place. One, you talked about job loss, but actually, will deflation be beneficial? Because they are overpriced. The market is basically across every product category because of lower productivity or lower literacy being transferred to a customer, has put a price point saying that we're a $100 trillion economy. So, TK, do you feel that the macroeconomic benefit is going to far outweigh what 8 billion people will get, or possibly have a chance to get? Whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it is access to many products.
So will it transform industry? The answer is yes, absolutely. Will it reduce the cost of services, goods and services? The answer is yes. There's no doubt about it. More in terms of services rather than in terms of goods. Because if you go back and look at the world today, one of the biggest reasons for asset inflation has been the fact that all governments are busy printing money. Right? And there's a funny joke about this. There's a guy who's now been appointed as the head of the Fed, Kevin Walsh. Kevin Walsh used to be an advisor to us some time ago. So Kevin Walsh once was telling us about the story of what happened after the financial crisis, 2008. So I believe what happened was every Thursday they had to make an announcement to keep the markets quiet on a Monday morning. So every Thursday they think about new announcement. So after a couple of weeks passed, and one day there were two guys who were assistants to Paulson. One was Kevin Walsh, and the other one was this guy called Neil Kashkari. These were the two guys. So one Thursday morning at around 10 o'clock, Paulson asked these two guys saying, hey, listen, what are you going to announce in the afternoon? And these guys had been working 36 hours at a stretch. They had no sleep. So Kevin Walsh joked saying, hey, listen, I'm completely out of ideas. But if you want an idea, here is an idea. Get the Fed to let the Treasury issue bonds and the Fed will buy it. Right? And Paulson turned to him and said, you guys are both out of your mind. This is a Ponzi scheme and I will not have a Ponzi scheme run in the Fed. So, by the way, go back and get some sleep and come. So both these guys went back to the hotel and they came in at 4:30 in the afternoon and Paulson asked them, so tell me, have you thought of something? So these guys said, yes, we have thought of something else. So Paulson said, guess what, it's 4:30. We tried contacting you. So at 3 o'clock, we made the announcement. And that was called QE. And, Kevin used to keep saying, it surprised me that 15 governments immediately after that followed the same QE that was originally meant to be a complete accident. It was a joke. 15 countries followed it. Net result is, if you looked at 1973, when you had the Yom Kippur War, and you had a real supply side shock to oil, the amount of the M2 in the economy at that time was less than 1% of market cap of the US. Today M2 is running at 11 trillion on a market cap of 6 trillion. So asset inflation is happening primarily because there's excess money running around. There's excess liquidity in the environment. And frankly, I don't see any Fed governor stepping in and cutting that, because that will mean deflation and a recession. And nobody wants that today. So there's a term that one of the Fed governors used, which said about the dollar, which said, our currency, your problem. So net result is that all this gets exported across the world and all of us will have inflation from that aspect. That's not going to go away.
I'm going to request the last two questions. One is Vandana and then Akshay, and then we move to the cash part system, which they will announce.
Okay, back here. Thanks. Thank you. That was very, very insightful, I must say. I must share a very fascinating experience of a humanoid. Can you see me? Do you want me to stand up? Okay. So, of a humanoid a couple of months ago called Ria, assembled here in Bangalore itself, okay, by Nachani Robotics, which I'm sure, all of you possibly on that side know. My question here is, after seeing Ria the humanoid, who can interact in any language, who can empathize, okay, can follow facial expressions, and of course not as many as we humans do, but more than 50% of our own facial expressions. And the future, they're saying that, people who are alone, kids are out of the country, is able to empathize as a companion virtually going ahead. I just want your thoughts on that. That they say that, and the price, whatever it is right now, is going to drop to something like maybe under 10 lakhs to have Ria in their home. Your thoughts, please.
So I personally don't know about Ria. I haven't followed this particular development, but the general trend of what you're talking about is happening. I mean, if you look at especially the work coming out in this particular case of what's called physical AI or embodied AI, the two countries that are really at the forefront are Japan and China in robotics, and Japan in particular, for exactly the reasons that you're talking of. They have a population that is aging much faster than everywhere else, and they do think that embodied AI agents are going to be very important for them as a society. I'm just interested in this in the context of it as a scientific problem. How do you build an embodied agent that does all these things? And those problems are still not fully solved. So what you might have seen, they probably can solve some of these problems, but it's not a problem that has been solved at the very fundamental level in the way the human body functions, and expecting an AI agent to function in the same way. These right now are more or less using LLM-based reasoning engines to do what they do, and that's not how we function. There's a lot of intelligence that is embodied in us, and the next phase of embodied AI that you're going to see are AIs that are actually have bodies that learn about how to interact with the world using their bodies from the ground up, rather than having an LLM-based intelligent sort of controller sitting on top as their brains. So it's happening. Am I happy about that? No. As you can tell, I'm very sort of cautious about all these things. So I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's coming. So
it was very much here in Bangalore. Nachani Robotics has developed, and
I should follow up. I don't know about them, so I should look
just
it up.
sharing. I mean, it's a fascinating space, especially where loneliness is concerned. Going ahead, the future, the agent from that. So I just wanted your viewpoint on it. Thank you for that.
Thank you. The last question from Akshay, and after that, Uday has a bunch of announcements.
Thank you. Okay, great. This is working. My name is Akshay. My favorite food is chicken biryani or mutton biryani and chicken 65. That combination can't be beat. I actually run a tech company. We don't do AI, but we do a lot of RNNs and LSTM. My question is to all three of you, and we touched upon this briefly, right? So currently, Claude Mythos is supposed to be a 10 trillion parameter model. Looking at how parameter numbers have doubled roughly every 8-9 months, as opposed to Moore's law, which is 24 months, you can assume a 100 trillion model in, say, 4 years on the outside. Now, while there's no specific correlation, like you said, the number of parameters don't necessarily mean a better model, right? There are other ways to do it. It doesn't mean at 100 trillion or 200 trillion, you'll get to AGI, but you'll get to a very complex form of AI, which does a lot more, like Claude today does what was thought impossible 5 years ago, right? At that point, what TK said about how people will be out of jobs, and then essentially no one knows what to do, right? I wanted your individual opinions, because you all have very different views on what's happening now versus what will happen, on what will happen to society itself. What do you think will happen to all of us. Because this K-shaped thing that we're talking about, right, where people like us have access to tools, etc., where people are unemployed, I'm not bullish on that. And when TK touched upon the future and how the Luddites and there was massive upheaval for 100 years, that got me very interested. Sorry for the meandering question.
I think we'll let the youngest member answer this because he's going to be the one who's going to get impacted the most.
Hopefully, so I think as we've been talking about this multiple times, right? We are not really sure how it's going to evolve and what's going to happen. But the counter view that I have on this is that if we were to put ourselves back as humans, and Anil has been talking about it multiple times, right? Humans are extremely resilient. They evolve very much. And TK was also talking about it. We are a very competitive species in itself, right? So we have survived. Think of it in terms of, and sometimes I think about it in terms of saying that, look, possibly in an earlier generation when computers were being introduced and computerization was happening, and people were not very clear about what impact it's going to have, they had similar debates, right? The point is that, of course, this is a much larger change, but I'm very positive about how we will evolve towards it. Will it cause a lot of damage and inequity in some ways? I think it will. Some people will lose out, but overall for humanity as survival, I think we will adapt and move on. I mean, that's my limited view.
I think that's a fair assessment. The question is how much disruption and how much, will people suffer through the transition and who will be left behind after all that is done, after the dust settles. So the way to, in my mind, the way I think about this is like the same argument comes up with climate change, right? People will say, the Earth system has always gone through changes, massive changes in climate, but what it hasn't gone through before in terms of climate is the rapidity of change. So the biosphere has always adapted to changing climate, but the changes happened at a pace where plants and animals were able to adapt, and that is not the case anymore, where the climate system is changing so fast that now we have pockets of sort of ecosystem extinctions going on, very, very rapid extinctions going on. Something similar as a like if you think of it as an analogy or a metaphor, I never know what word to use here, but I agree with Mohan that, we've had technological changes before, but they were, much slower than what we are witnessing now. So whether we'll be able to adapt to it fast enough is a big open question. And my sense is that, if you look at what's happening with climate change and the adaptation of plants and animals to what's happening there, that gives us a clue as to whether we will adapt to this. This is our version of climate change, apart from the actual climate itself. So, I don't think anyone has a clear answer. You yourself said the pace of change, like we'll get to 10 trillion, 100 trillion in 4 years. That's extraordinary. Like if you just look at 7 decades ago when this whole thing started, we were talking of, parameter counts that were in the 10s and 20s, right? And ridiculous little systems, and where we are now is just insane. So,
slightly different perspective. While I agree with what everyone has said here, I think the biggest thing that if you look at us as a species is, can we run faster than a tiger? Are we stronger than a tiger? We are not. But yet we have survived. Why? Because we have had a societal framework that has made us work together to address a problem and kind of solve it. And that is what we call survival. Right? When animals went cold, they went into a cave. We figured out how to kind of use fire effectively. So the human species has been built on getting society to work together for an objective. I think the only concern that I would have right now with this change is we are not having enough debates around this. We are kind of ducking it today because the political system honestly doesn't know how to answer it. They don't have a point of view. I don't think they appreciate the level at which this is going to affect society. And all of us together as a group are getting more polarized around issues which are immaterial rather than addressing the big issue, big elephant in the room. So I think that's the biggest worry that I have today. In fact, I was talking to a political leader recently and he was telling me, hey, listen, what do you mean there is unemployment? I can see it in front of my eyes every day. So I asked him how. He said, look at religious functions. Look at the number of people traveling for religious functions. Right? All the flights to Varanasi are full. Why? Because people have enough time on their hands. They have the money, they have the time on their hands, they're busy doing this. Any function that you have today, be it a political rally, be it a religious function, the number of people who want to partake in that is huge. And I think that's the big worry that I have, that from a societal perspective, we are not debating the big elephant in the room. We're ducking that. And I think that's something that we seriously have to bring to the forefront.
The elephant being AI.
AI.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, TK. Thank you, Mohan. This is to be continued. As we say, this will be another series of talks, maybe with the same players, maybe with others. Please give them a big hand.